I could.
I could be wrong.
I could.
I could.
I could be wrong.
I could be wrong.
I could be.
I could.
I could be wrong.
Could be.
I could be.
I could be.
You know, I could be wrong.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another podcast of I Could Be Wrong. I am Matthew Johnson, I'm the lead pastor here at the Tree.Church, and today I am joined by Pastor Michael Giacomoni.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know, Michael and I started this podcast a couple years ago, and so we're in season 2. We have been attaching this podcast to the Sunday series that we were in because there were 5 different controversial topics, and we wanted to be able to provide a follow-up in case anyone had any questions, and so that was great. But now we're going to kind of get back into the original heart behind this podcast, which is we want to explore topics of culture. So what's going on, kind of current events, and there's going to be some flexibility to this that if something pops up in the news and it becomes something that a lot of people are talking about, Michael and I want to talk about it not from the perspective of let's us inform everyone of what the right perspective is. Instead, we want to have a conversation and model for people what it looks like to think through an idea, to challenge each other, to get different perspectives.
Right.
And so that's what we hope to do today. Now, we want to acknowledge something. We're recording this in a church not too far from us, just a few doors down. There are different rooms that are being remodeled in our building. And so you might hear possibly some hammering, or I just heard a sawzall going off. So if you hear those noises, it's not something wrong going on. It's just we can't avoid it because we still wanted to record the podcast. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to dive right in. Actually, Michael, I want to ask a question just out of my own curiosity.
Sure.
I have in front of me a drink from Starbucks. I do not like coffee. I don't drink coffee. This is a caramel apple cider, which is
Nice.
Basically, they just took cider, which I already like, and they added a lot of caramel syrup to it, so a lot of sugar. I'm doing it just because my throat's a little sore today, just kind of raw from talking too much. What's your favorite drink? What's your go-to drinks in your life?
So if you ask Kenny Burcham, he's one of our coworkers here at the Tree. Anytime he goes to pick up coffee, he just, when he thinks about what I would like, he thinks, what is bad? What tastes gross? That's what Michael wants. It's like, what's like the darkest version? So I think I naturally have like a more bitter, I sound so pretentious, like a bitter palate. Like I like
Sure.
black coffee and I like stuff like that. And so I'll usually go for either a black drip coffee or something called an Americano, which is really good, which is they take like 3 shots of espresso and then fill it up with hot water. Or if I'm having like a morning, it's called a red eye, where they'll do the same thing, 3 shots of espresso and then black coffee on top of it, just in a cup, and I'll drink that. And that's a good.
See, I can always tell
That's
when you're
my
going to say
Sunday morning
something
drink.
that's a little humorous or whatever, because like your eyes get a little bit. And so
that's my
you
go-to.
know what? I don't know that I've ever even seen you drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee that much, and if I do, I'm really unceremonious about it. It's like I have friends who like they have their coffee cup, and for me it's like a styrofoam cup.
I don't ever remember you having a coffee in your hand. I don't ever remember you going in the office and
very rarely
getting a coffee. Okay,
very rarely. Or if I do, or you know what else is really good? There's this. Well, now there's this like nerdy coffee stuff. I'm also, even though I don't drink coffee that much,
You're a nerd.
I'm a nerd, so I research everything.
Yeah, you're all in on everything that you do.
Anything that I even have a passing interest in, I want to know everything about it. I want to learn every aspect. So there's this way to make coffee called cold brew, which almost makes it like tea. So you'll take coffee grounds, steep it in water for like 8 hours overnight. Yeah. And hot water.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. Tell me more.
I'll tell you what, hot water makes coffee acidic. No hot water makes it more sweet. I like that a lot too. It just takes forever to make. You know?
Yeah.
It's
You started
great here at
talking.
the Tree.Church. If you're interested, come to the Tree.Church. We have cold brew. It's great. Come have a cup of it.
Sure, all that's true, and I could not care less of anything you just said. I don't drink coffee. I don't like the taste, or I don't even like the smell of coffee.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even. Have you? Okay. What about like coffee grounds though?
It doesn't anything coffee related.
You're crazy.
All right, I'm gonna admit it. It smells like dog poop to me. I don't know why. It has a similar smell. You know, have you ever wondered if we see and smell the same thing that other people are?
Yes.
That's how I am with coffee, because people are like, oh, it smells so good. I'm like, okay, but it smells just like.
If I go to heaven one day and God's like, yeah, no, your version of green is not everybody's. Like, you know what I mean? Because there's no way to for real be able to tell. Who knows how we're all seeing things or hearing things?
I just heard a thing where they were like, dogs, they see red, but it's more like this color, and they don't really see this color. And I'm like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, doesn't that feel like made up stuff?
I just read. I have not fact checked this, so this could be super. Which is probably not great to talk
So you
about
could
on
be
a
wrong.
podcast. I could be wrong. There's like a weird sea animal, like a shrimp type thing. So we have in our eyeballs like primary color cones. There's like 3 of them. This animal has like 8. So it sees 8 primary colors. So every color we see is a combination of those 3. It has 8 primary colors.
So it breaks them down even more.
Yeah. So it's seeing like colors that we'll never even, combinations of colors that we don't even have access to.
Can you imagine when we get to heaven, if that's what we see everything, we'll be like,
People
wow.
are just freaking out.
What is that color? All right. Well, today's podcast, here's what we're going to try. I had kind of a revelation recently, and so I just want to share it with you. Okay. And I want to get your opinion on it. So, so this is really how this podcast came about. You and I like to talk about anything. Like we get downtime. We can talk about sports. We can talk about politics. We can talk about current events, cultural stuff. Yeah. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do. And so this was one where when I thought about it, I actually was like, this is legit. I really do cherish our friendship. But when I thought of it, I was like, I can't wait to talk to Michael about it. And it's actually been hard for me because I've wanted to talk with you about it, but I was like, I got to save it for the podcast.
Yeah, you got to wait till the time's right.
All right, so I'm going to talk for a few minutes, kind of explain just my premise, and then I just want to go back and forth and just see if you have thoughts, or if you're just like, I don't agree with you.
Sure.
So I'm starting to find myself really bored with social media. Mm-hmm. And so like social media, I think we all know the things that are super annoying about it. You know, the people that are using it to just be too harsh about their opinions, and then everyone feels like, well, if you shared an opinion, I have to give you a counterpoint. Like we all get annoyed with that. So that's not what I'm talking about, because for most of that, either I can ignore it now, or honestly, I've unfollowed or silenced most of those people, and so I don't get a ton of that in my feed.
Yeah.
But I just realized I'm just super, super bored. It's like this type of scrolling where you're just like, you're almost not, I'm not stopping for anything. Yeah. And I was like, I wonder what that is. And I was just, this is kind of how I'm wired, where I like to think like the why behind my behavior. And I was like, I wonder what it is. And this is what I came to. This was like the revelation. In the past, what I used to love about social media and even Instagram was it felt like people were inviting me and like everyone into their lives, like their authentic lives, right? Yeah. And so like Facebook was that way initially, and then it got really weird, and then Instagram basically was like the solution to that of like, it's just pictures. People are showing you what's going on in their life. And I loved it. I still to this day do love first day of school pictures, because it just feels like it's like such a mark in time, you know, like because a lot of times it'll show you memories of like last year or something, and like you see people's kids from last year to this year, and it's like the best thing in the world, right?
Yeah, super cool.
But I just started to find myself like, it just felt like I was not interested in anyone's stuff. And then here's what I realized. I started seeing the exact same poses by people, and they're not normal poses. Yeah. So like this can go all the way back to like the duck face of girls, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So the first wave of social media that I was familiar with, I was in junior high, maybe high school, was MySpace. Okay. It was the classic, you do a peace sign and purse your lips like a duck. Okay. It was ever prevalent.
How long ago would that be then? What years is that?
That's like 2006.
Okay.
It was like the first big wave. That far back. It was the first big wave of social media. Almost as soon as like just such a short amount of time from like a personal computer was in your house. Like, we have computers in our homes, not just in like a school or a workplace or for work. The social media was almost immediate. People finding a way, because even MySpace was the first big one. Before that, there's like Friendster,
I don't even know
this like underground stuff of people wanting to do this to highlight their lives. You know, like it's as old as the internet. You know.
Yeah, so
that's where the duck face comes from. People doing that.
Now, people might not know. So, can you look right into that camera over there and just?
I'm not gonna do it.
So basically,
Google it. Look it up.
Yeah, they stick their lips out and stuff.
Yeah.
The
duck face.
Yeah. Here, I'm gonna pause here. I might have shared this in the past. When I want to tell you my first social media experience, my brother Daniel, who's 3 years older than me, called me. So this is at least 11 years ago, probably more than. No, it'd have to be more than that. But I just remember I was in my old house. And so this is whenever MySpace. So so if it was 2006, whatever, because Facebook was just kind of competing with MySpace at the time. And Daniel goes, he goes, dude, do you have a MySpace page? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And he was like, you've never heard of MySpace? And I was like, no, I don't. I was a youth pastor at the time.
Sure.
And he goes, how about Facebook? And I'm like, no, dude, I don't know what it is. He goes, okay, well, it's basically like a website dedicated to you and your life. And he was like, tell me about it, like all excited. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever. Yeah, it sounds like, it sounded like so pretentious and like, and he's like, trust me, all of your teens are doing it. And I'm like, okay, but adults shouldn't be doing that. And then it wasn't long after that in order to connect with students, I had to get involved in that.
You gotta leverage it.
And so anyway, all that stuff.
Well, even you saying that, so your perspective is like, wow, that sounds so narcissistic. You're a youth pastor. You're an adult, probably married with things called values and virtue, right? in like a mature brain. Yeah. For me, I'm in junior high, and so MySpace was cool. You could like write code into it to do stuff. So I wrote a bit of code into my MySpace website to have a pig be dancing on the homepage when you went in there next to my face. And I thought, it was the coolest thing that's ever happened in the whole
Sure.
world. I was so like captivated by
Yeah.
this thing of like, it is, I can personify who I am to the world, and girls will think I'm cool now, and like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I can make,
Here, I'm gonna need you to make sure I have like accurate memory. So I never actually did MySpace. I started with Facebook.
Sure.
MySpace seemed like the Wild West to me. Like
no moderation,
okay,
chaos.
Are these things true as I say them? And they might not be. First of all, didn't you have like theme music, or like when you went to someone's page, it
When
was
you
like
went to
real
someone's
loud?
page, their song would play. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Which
I won't tell you what mine was because it was inappropriate. But
Okay.
yeah.
But this is the one I'm like 99% sure this is true. You ranked your friends, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you have a MySpace top 8. This is even saying it sounds like it's made up. Yeah.
Can you imagine if that was
You have a
nowadays?
top 8 where literally daily, hourly, you could go in and change the code of your website. So here are my top 8, top 12. You could pick how many you wanted to do, friends. And you would actively rank people. And it was a thing of like, oh, I have Spencer in my top 8. I'm not in his top 8. Now he's out of my. It was very dramatic. And it was like a thing when people, you can tell when someone broke up.
Oh, man.
They were number 1 in their top 8. Now they're not on it
not
at
at
all.
all.
It's like, you know, it's way too into someone's personal life for the internet. It's horrifying.
Like, yeah, it's totally horrifying, but in the same sense, it's like the best way to let someone know like we got an issue.
yeah, we got beef.
Yeah,
You know what else is funny about MySpace is like it was mainly music driven. That's why it started.
Yeah, right. I do
Like
remember
Taylor Swift was discovered on MySpace.
Okay.
How crazy is that? Like the
Like-
biggest artist in the world right now.
like Justin Bieber type discover. Like I think
Yep.
his was YouTube.
His
but,
was YouTube, but the same thing. Taylor Swift was on MySpace is how she got famous.
that's
A couple
interesting.
other people do. I don't remember who they are now, but she being the biggest one
Yeah.
because she's still so prevalent.
So yeah, when my brother told me about it, I thought one, it was narcissistic, but I thought like no one will ever come to my page. Like I'm not fascinated enough. Yeah, so it was weird. Okay, all that's it. Okay,
I thought people would love the dancing pig. I was sure they would come to my page, listen to
and
my
you're probably
music.
right. People came, right?
I was a very nerdy kid. Probably not.
Okay, so here's where it started. It started losing me recently though. So I started noticing the same poses. So I like the duck face was the original one. So what I'm about to say, like I'm being sarcastic, I'm being a little snarky, but I'm not trying to be mean.
Sure.
Okay, so like when people like, as I'm saying this, there's gonna be a lot of people. If there's any teens that are watching this, they're gonna go like, I do that.
Might feel targeted.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not
Sure.
targeting, but I'm saying this is what I observed where I went. It's just odd to me that everybody's doing the same pose. So like you would have girls, mainly girls, that they would do poses in the same spot, but within the pictures show 3 different emotions. And so like the first one was they were always looking off to the right of someone that's just behind or off the camera, and they're laughing, like belly laugh. Ah. Then the next one, they could be like looking down and they have their hand in their hair. I don't know what that pose is.
Yeah.
Like I honestly don't know what it's supposed to be. But you know what I'm talking about, where
I know
their
exactly
hands
what you're
and
talking
they're looking down.
It's very
and
pensive, very thoughtful.
yeah, so the first person I saw it, I was like, okay, like someone caught them as they were putting their hair behind their ear or something. Like that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But then when I saw everyone, and they're not even always even touching their hair, and I was like, okay, that's weird. And then the next one could be mad or whatever. And it was just weird. I was like, okay, wait, but everybody's doing the same poses. They're doing the same pose from the same spot. So like this might just sound like a jaded perspective, but I'm like, none of that emotion is real because you don't go from laughing to reflective to angry, like not that quick in the same
if you
spot.
do, it'd be mania. It'd be like, oh
Right,
my gosh,
yeah.
what is happening to go?
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And then every experience where people went, they started taking pictures. It was very pose. It was like how they stood and like every. Again, I'm not just targeting women or girls, but they seem to be more prevalent. Like guys are dumb enough still where they're like every picture, you know, they're doing something.
Them and what's the joke about like the guy in his truck with the sunglasses, and it's just like that's the go-to dad pose. It's like that's all of their somehow there's an American flag in the background somewhere.
Right, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So this is where the tension was for me. I started to realize all of this is not the real moment.
Right.
So what used to really excite me in the sense I was like, oh, I love this. I love being invited into your life. I started to realize I'm now being invited into their brand, where they're branding themselves like a product because that's what the cool thing is now. And I started to realize I don't care. Like in general, I don't love advertising in the sense of like, I think we're all kind of jaded to it, right? You're just like,
that's like a value of our church when we talk about how we talk about events, how we talk about Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
It's like we do not want to bait and switch people. We do grassroots advertisement, which means we will sink resources into invite people, invite your friends. And we're not going to get a billboard.
Even speak to the language we use is like, just be literal.
Yep,
right?
just be literal. So something that, so if you don't know, one of my jobs here at the Tree is to oversee our communications and basically how we talk to not only our church, but also our community. And something that Matthew's really passionate about that he really taught our staff is that don't be disingenuous in how you talk to people. If everything is the best ever, nothing is the best ever.
Right.
If everything is the greatest worship
If
night
everything's
we've ever
going to
have,
life change, be a life change, right? Like
and life isn't changing at all. And it's just like, okay, you have to be genuine and don't oversell it. State what's happening.
Yeah.
We're going to have a time of worship, a meaningful time of worship. We're going to hear a message. And we're going to hear a message from Pastor Matthew. We can't wait for it. And to let what's actually happening speak for itself. It doesn't need to be qualified with all this exaggeratory speak and all this branding and marketing and advertisement behind it. Let that be enough. Just state what's happening, because if people are interested, they'll come. And if people experience that life change, they'll be evangelistic about it. And they'll tell people. They'll do that job for us.
So with that mindset, because that is one of my values, I find myself more and more disinterested. So that was just like where it all started. I went like, I just don't care because all these are posts. Like
It's fake.
It's fake. That's how it feels to me. And so these real moments become fake, and this is what started to create the tension. So this is actually where I'm trying to lead to. I'm not just trying to go like, isn't that stupid what they do? Sure. Look how great I am. Yeah. That's not it at all. I started to go, okay, wait a second. These are very beautiful places that a lot of them are, but they're posing, and I started going, so here's where the tension was. I thought, what does it do? So this is what I want to talk about. What does it do to a generation when you teach them to brand themselves as individuals?
Yeah.
Like because I have my own thoughts of like how that can be damaging, but these individuals who are in these places that are like, some of them are very beautiful. So it can be, Grand Canyon, it can be, or like a cool place, a city, or even a fun family moment, an event. And in their minds, in order to experience this moment at its fullest, I have to shape my brand. Yeah. So like in this moment, instead of just sitting there and going like, look at this, this is beautiful, and not even just taking a picture of it or getting like a family picture. So in the future, I can have a reminder of that moment that's still in my memory.
Sure.
I have to post something so that a future group can like it on social media, and that's where this moment gets value. It's not in this moment, it's a future moment, and so I'm a slave to them. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. As you say that, two things immediately come to mind of the consequence of what you're talking about. Of now, me as a person, it's not enough that this social media site is to post cool pictures of things I like or to post pictures of me and my family. Now as an extension of my brand as a human being. Where that becomes super problematic is no longer can people be present in a moment, because everything has to be about the future consequences of what they're doing. So it's not enough for me to just enjoy a moment. I have to think about, I have to get this picture just right, posed in portrait mode, framed the right way. I need negative space over top. I need the eyes to be, there's like a whole thing that I know how to get a good picture, and that has to be just so that people can see what's happening here right now. It means you're not in the moment. You know what I mean? And if someone, like, that idea haunts me as like a young dad.
Yeah.
So I'll be hanging out with my kids, and I'll be thinking about like, man, I want to be present with them. I want to experience all of these little things. And every time, so me and you had a talk recently. This is kind of a stretch, but I think my wife's gonna be so mad that I talk about this. But
do we need to pause the recording right now so you can reach out?
No, I think it'll be fine. We'll edit it out if she hates this. But we've had arguments about family pictures for this reason.
Okay.
Where it's like I have a very impassioned stance
against. I think you and I are gonna be on the same page.
I think we've talked about this. Where it's been like a year since we talked about it, but. Where me and Gina, we have these young kids, and she wants to do like family photos. I'm like, I don't want to go sit in the bed of a truck. That's not where I hang out. That's not accurate. I don't hang out in the woods.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to go do this posed picture of me and my family wearing these outfits. I would rather, if I see one of my daughters enjoying something, I think it's cool to take a picture so you have that memory to recall. I like that. I think that's really special. But the idea of posing this thing, what it's saying is like, first of all, every experience I've had with family pictures growing up, you're fighting, you hate each other, you're yelling at each other. You're not going to convince me that you're all present.
At least one person has swollen eyes because they've been crying, right?
Their dad just yelled at him for picking their sister and kicking somebody. It's like,
I'm
okay.
so guilty of that.
So for me, it's just like, man, I would rather just enjoy moments. And if I'm constantly focusing on what does this do for my brand, not in the moment, I make decisions differently. Mm-hmm. The people I hang out with are different. Are my friends marketable? Mm-hmm. Are my friends brandable?
Sure,
are my friends attractive? Are they cool?
Yeah.
If I hang out with so-and-so, is it going to give so-and-so fear of missing out, which kind of feels good sometimes? Like I like feeling like I'm in the in with the cool person.
Sure, right, yeah.
I schedule everything a little bit different.
Man, you're listing so many good things. Can you remember all those things you just listed?
No.
I kind of want to break them down kind of one by one. But no, I love what you're saying. And that's the tension that I'm feeling is like, I'm concerned for people because I feel like everyone's experiences is now getting cheapened to some degree because of what you just said. So like not being fully present in the moment.
Yeah.
like I even feel this way. Photographers are going to hate us, Michael. So I know we have a bunch in our church.
We're not trying to hurt your business, I promise.
We're not, because other people might love this, and I genuinely mean this. You can have a completely different opinion.
Right, and while it's not for me for that reason, I do understand. I like walking to someone's house and seeing a nice picture of their family.
Sure.
I get the value. It's just more of like a personal thing. Yeah.
No, totally. And so, but with me, like I've even seen like wedding recap videos that I'm like, I was at that wedding.
That was not that cool.
That was not that wedding.
Yeah.
And that was weird to me because like when Mary and I, when we picked our photographer, so this is 22 years ago now, 21 and a half to 22 years. I should know that more certain. But anyway, when we picked our photographer, we went into this place. There's a professional company. And literally I looked at the wall and the entire walls, all 4 of them were just covered in wedding pictures, like spontaneous ones. And I literally said to the lady that was across from us, I said, she goes, what kind of pictures do you like? And I went, Mary and I had already talked about it, but I go, I like that picture, and like that picture. And she goes, that's all the same photographer. Oh, cool. And his name was Cleon. I remember because I had another friend by that name. And she said, that's all the same photographer. It's actually one of our trainers. What I liked about all of them is he captured people in spontaneous moments. Oh, so again, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I said to him when I met, I said, we would love for you to do that at our wedding. So we're going to do the traditional, like groom and his side of the family, bride and her side of the family. But I was like, in the wedding, just capture us in moments. So we took some other staged ones outside where you're looking at each other.
20 years ago is rather cutting edge. Like
it
now
was.
That might
it
be
felt
more of a
different.
Trend. That's not normal for the time.
But I didn't want to stage those moments.
Totally.
I wanted him to capture real moments.
What's actually happening.
And that's the tension that I feel is, and I agree completely with what you're saying is, they're now devaluing their moments because they're thinking, in order to have an authentic moment, I have to stage it versus just loving this moment. And honestly, if it doesn't get captured, that's okay. Yeah. It doesn't get captured because you have it in your mind and it's your experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And people make compromising decisions for the sake of that brand at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not even just that like, so yeah, you're not being present, and that's heartbreaking in one thing, but to make a decision based off of that, how many great things are you going to miss out on? So here's a really good simple example. Like if I want to go to a restaurant, I'm not going to go to the trashy, divey place because I can't take a picture of my plate and post on Instagram. I could miss out on the best meal of my life.
Sure. Yeah.
How many times have you been in like a really unsuspecting restaurant? It was like, this meal is incredible. Yeah. Or the amount of times that I've hung out with like a new friend that I wasn't like, that would have been unsuspecting. Like you wouldn't have I wouldn't have plotted this out, but I had gotten this really special conversation with somebody. Yeah. If I was so focused on every aspect of my life being tailored just so, we were talking about today, my sister Mary, she works here. She's our director of junior high, and she told the story of when she was in high school. Her friends would literally.
This is a crazy
so
story.
She's just young enough for me. MySpace was my thing. We didn't have Instagram yet. Phones didn't have cameras yet when I was in high school. She did. So she's in the space where her and her friends would literally plan events to go hang out to take pictures.
They would get dressed up for it, right?
They get dressed up for it.
I remember her talking about this.
They would plan staged events, and like I said, I'm just old. I'm like 5 years older than her, enough to be like, wait, what? Were you embarrassed when you talked about it? Was it one of those? And I didn't even ask her, like, was it one of those things that like you were all like, you all kind of knew that was the thing, but you were like, no one would talk about it? She's like, no, that was like, we openly said like, oh, it'll make great pictures.
And they dressed up, right?
You're
saying dressed up and everything, yeah.
I'm sitting there like, that is the craziest, most disingenuous. I would be embarrassed if I told that to somebody. And the fact that they would talk about it with no shame, it was just normalized. Like, well, this is just what we do. It felt like anytime that my brand or the way I want to be perceived impacts real life choices of who I hang out with, how I hang out with them, not only am I missing out on so much good stuff, don't you think at some point, like, you would feel like a fraud? Yeah. Like somewhere deep down, I know this isn't me. I know this is I'm presenting a fake version of myself. I think that's might be some of my concern is they might not know that because it's not in their generation. Because here's what I think. Like this sounds way more harsh than I mean it, so let me explain it. When I look at all the same poses, I do think they all look fake. Yeah. They obviously aren't communicating that to each other because of how many people like it and how many people comment like, you're so beautiful, that's so wonderful. And I'm like, you're all doing the same poses, and so you're all saying to each other, this is the standard, we're okay. So they're not saying we're fake. They're saying this is what we do as a generation. And I think older generations can look at it and go, oh, but you're missing out. So like, let's use Mary's friend's story. Yeah. They had an opportunity as friends to genuinely have a good time by just getting together and cooking out, right? Playing games. Like you're legendary for this. You are a gatherer. You want friends over your house. And honestly,
I'm being genuine. I don't know that I've ever seen pictures of a gathering at your house.
Never.
You guys have done some when you vacation and stuff like that, but even then it's like, it's the photo dump at the end, not during everything, where you guys go like, here's 7 pictures I captured, like the fun that we had.
Yeah.
But I don't, like, when you're having parties at your house, you're not like doing it for that. So all that said is that group could have got together and had an experience, but in their minds, hearts, however you want to look at it, they thought the ideal thing that would bring them the greatest joy is to do an event that in that moment is not actually bringing them joy. Like, they don't like it in the moment. Their joy is a future joy when they post the pictures and people like it.
That's devastating.
You get what I'm saying?
That's heartbreaking, because what they're saying is we could talk about dopamine too a little bit, in a minute or whatever, but the feeling they're about to get from what's going to happen after is more meaningful to them than just enjoying a moment with their friends. How devastating.
So talk about dopamine. We've talked about this before.
Sure.
Because you were the first one to tell me this, where I went, and when you hear it, you go, at least I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I'd never even heard of dopamine until you
So dopamine is a naturally occurring chemical in your body that releases during certain events. Famously, pornography is one of them. It releases dopamine in your brain.
It's like pleasure, right? It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure-seeking thing. That's why people enjoy watching pornography, and that's why it's also very addictive.
Sure.
That's another thing that makes dopamine really unique. It's an addictive chemical that your body naturally creates. Wild science behind that. But things like pornography, alcohol, anything that has gambling, sugar, anything that has deeply addictive properties, it's usually the culprit is dopamine. There's some
so whatever it is that's bringing you joy, pleasure, it's triggering that chemical, right?
Yes.
And so that's what happens.
And that's problematic for a couple of reasons. One, eventually it's not enough. Dopamine, your mind gets numb to it. So we've talked about sexuality many times and the problem of pornography and lust and all this stuff. When you're a kid and you Google a picture of a naked person on your computer, that is enough for dopamine. You're like, wow. If that becomes a pornography addiction, or you have a problem, all of a sudden that's not enough one day. And you start looking up more aggressive things and maybe sexually aggressive things. Then maybe one day you're an adult and you're seeking out a prostitute, or you're going to strip clubs. That risky sexual behavior, it's because your dopamine receptors are dying and they're getting so flooded nonstop that the same thing won't do it anymore. It's heartbreaking. Alcohol is the same thing. It's why alcoholics start with 2 beers, give me a buzz, and that's enough. Then one day it's like, I got to have a half a handle of, or a half a fifth of whiskey to feel anything. And it's like, that's because of the same thing. And you're like, your body becomes numb to it. And anything that releases dopamine. Here's what's so horrifying about social media. All of those things, gambling, pornography, alcohol, you wouldn't suggest to a kid.
Right.
Fair enough. Like, we're not giving those things to kids.
Right.
They're at the most high stress times of their life. Their brains aren't done developing yet. We're not going to give them access to all this stuff, but we do with social media. And that releases dopamine in their brain.
Yeah, so explain that. Where does the dopamine come into social media?
So if I post a picture and I get 300 likes on that picture, there's a reason why it feels good. That's a dopamine rush in your brain. It makes you feel liked. It makes you feel safe. It makes you feel warm. And that's the same exact thing. And that's why it's addictive. So kids get addicted to social media because it's a chemical reaction in their brain that they're becoming dependent on. So here's the big fear. A lot of times, so I didn't have social media yet, but here's like the weird, this is for, if you're my age, if you're like 30, you'll probably resonate with what I'm about to say. It's such a unique like moment in time. I had a cell phone, no social media. So if I was sad or bored or needed validation, I would text when I was in like 10th grade, maybe 11th grade. I would text like 50 people, like, hey, what's up? And just see who texts back. And just because I want to talk to people, because it felt good.
Right, yeah.
If you text me back, if you were a cute girl and you text me back, if you were just, or a friend that I thought was cool, if you were my friend that I had like high in my MySpace top 8, like a friend I really liked, and you text me back, it's validating.
Sure,
it was like, it was kind of like, I'm processing this in real time too, so this might sound ridiculous. But I remember I would be bored or sad and I'd text a bunch of people, hey, what's up? And then anytime I got that text back, I'm like, it felt good. I'm like, yeah, people like me. People want me. And dopamine's like flooding in my brain. And it feels like I'm desired and I'm cool and I'm valued. The new wave of that is this social media thing where if I post a picture, so that's where these kids, why they care so much about the perfect picture to capture, the perfect moment. Because they know if I do this pose and I show off my body this way, or if I capture this perfect thing, or if I am at this beautiful setting, I'm going to get X amount of likes and it feels really, really good. And the problem with that is it never allows them to feel genuine emotion. Dopamine confuses your brain. What is appropriate is to feel sad sometimes, is to feel bored sometimes, is to allow
and to sit into that,
and to
right?
sit into it.
Spirit, yeah.
So like if you hear a sad song on the radio that reminds you of being in high school and it was a sad moment, and you're just like, turn it off, let me text 50 people, or let me like post on Instagram so I can feel better. You're never allowing yourself to process through organically what you probably should be processing through. Be sad, because here's what's cool. Your body then, if you're sad, like I mentioned this earlier, if you cry really hard, sometimes you feel good afterwards. It's like almost like, it's just like a release of like, okay, I needed to just be upset and to cry. And then I feel that's your body fixing a problem. Serotonin floods your brain, all this stuff that's better for you, that's not addictive, or it opens up your serotonin receptors and it makes you feel better. That is an organic process that's supposed to happen. You can hack that and skip it by using booze, gambling, drugs, social media. So then you never really feel sadness, but you also never really feel joy.
Right.
You never feel elation or that freedom of just like, oh, I feel better. You just never really feel anything. And these kids are just flat, and then they're anxious and they're depressed, and they're just, their whole life is about making this brand and posing. And if they don't get enough, and this is the second, I said very earlier, there are two things came to mind. This is the second thing. If they don't get that social media engagement, they post that picture and it doesn't get 300 likes, it gets like 40 likes. Devastating, because so much of their life is now contingent on this release and this freedom of like experience this validation from people who honestly they don't care about, because that's not the point. You know what I mean? Like, they care about the social equity side of it, but they don't individually care about all these people engaging with their content. They care about the feeling that it gives them and feeling wanted and desired. And if they don't get that, kids are devastated. It's like taking booze away from an alcoholic, and then all of a sudden they freak out. It's like, it's dangerous.
And what's sad about that is oftentimes, especially for girls, is the pictures that get the most attention have a sexual bent to them, whether it's a sexier pose, sexier clothing. So like whether it's an outfit or even bathing suits and bikinis, that gets the most likes.
You know your audience, and so you play to it because you want that rush. You want that dopamine
Because even
rush.
one of the picture poses that's so weird to me oftentimes is girls basically putting their butt forward.
I was going to say, that's the new duck face. You'll put your butt back and your head over your shoulder. It's like how they all do it. That's the new version of it. That's
and this is going to sound super naive, but like initially I was like, that's a weird pose that they're looking behind themselves. It was actually someone else that said to me, the point of this pose is not their face.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I see it now.
Yeah,
you know, I get what you're saying now. But that, it was just, to me, it was kind of weird, but it's because that gets the most likes. And so one you said is like, we're not fully present in the moment. We've talked about how now another group gets to decide the value of this moment because of them liking it or not liking it. And most of the people who are shaping that don't really have your best interest at heart. I mean, if you're talking about hundreds of likes, let's just be honest. We should not have hundreds of people influencing our life. Is that fair?
100%.
Like you should have a select group that has influence in your life.
That you have allowed and like that you have vetted and said, I trust this person's opinion, and because of the relationship they have with me, the level they care for me, whether it be some spirit virtue that they have that I admire, or Christianity, or they're a pastor, or they're a lead teacher, you know, and so opening up that gate is crazy.
It is. And so like in social media, and this can sound like we're exaggerating, but I think hopefully we're making the point enough that we're convincing, is this force that really is shaping the value system of teens and young adults and adults, is they're allowing an unknown group, because it really is the amount of likes. And sometimes it can be specifically, oh, that boy liked it, that girl liked it, or whatever. But they're allowing this other group to shape their behaviors and their values and even how they enjoy life. And like you said, they're not the vetted group. They're not ones. So to me, it just seems so dangerous with that. Another part of it that my fear is too is it really is training a generation to be fake. And because like on one hand, it's just training their behavior. So like we've used the example of the poses. Like okay, here's another one that I just don't understand. I don't understand the selfie in the mirror where your phone is blocking your face, because to me it's just strange. Like honestly, I would think, I don't love selfies in general, but I would think it's a better picture if you just move your phone, or like the ones
point be your face,
right. So it's blocking the face, or the other one where they're looking at their phone, but the mirror is the picture. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And I go like, it feels better to have someone else take your picture at that point, or something else. But okay, all that said is this generation is like telling, this is how your behavior is going to be. So it's telling them that behavior, and eventually it's telling them to do things they would not naturally do. And so therefore they're being fake. It's not their value system. And so it's like, you have to be fake. And this unknown group is shaping these values. You have to be fake so that you can have enjoyment in this moment, but you don't actually get the enjoyment now. It's delayed enjoyment because they're going to tell it later. Like you get what I'm saying. Like this whole picture just seems so weird to me.
So as somebody in that generation, it has real consequences too. I was not planning on talking about this, but I think it's a good example, albeit a little embarrassing. Last night, this literally happened last night. I was hanging out with my kids in my living room, and I just have like a pet peeve about being on camera or filmed when I don't know it. I think it's good. I think it's because I'm in this generation where I feel like, well, if you're gonna record me, I want to make sure my posture. We were just talking about bad posture. You realize you're sitting like a seat. I want to make sure I'm like sitting upright and I'm like, what am I wearing? Am I wearing like sweatpants? Like what's going on? But I was playing a video game with Darby. Like she's just so captivated by video games, and so she has a fake controller. We're sitting there playing together, and I'm standing up, and we're talking. And I turned around, and my wife is videoing me, and I immediately was just like, no. I don't want to even think that this is going to be seen.
Sure.
I want to be able to relax and enjoy the moment that I'm in, and it's because I'm being in that generation. It's exhausting to have to feel like every aspect of my life needs to be on and marketable and buttoned up. So if she sends that to appear that I care about it, I'm like, well, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to look
let's
like
do it again, right?
Or worst case scenario, we'll take it again, but like make it so I say something nicer to my kid, which I didn't do that. But but it is that gut reaction of like, it removes me from a moment. There's a movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Yeah. Where there's two versions. There's one that a long time ago, and then Ben Stiller and Sean Penn remade the movie probably in like 2012 or 2013. I could be wrong about the date, but somewhere in that time. And there's a beautiful moment in it where basically Ben Stiller's character is trying to deliver a final paycheck to this very famous photographer who's very elusive. He's like a real hippie. He's always out and about. And the movie is about Ben Stiller experiencing life outside of the office and going on these adventures trying to find this guy. And the end of it haunts me. I think about this all the time.
So if you want to see this movie, hit pause right now.
Yeah, I'm about to spoil
about to ruin
this.
The
is like
this.
Legitimately like the ending of the movie. This is the big moment. But there's this ending scene where it's Sean Penn. He directed the movie, but he's playing this role of this guy, where he finally finds him and he goes through this whole cool process and he makes it up on some cliffside where he's trying to capture a snow leopard, which is like never even been filmed. It's like
on the side of a mountain.
Side of a mountain. He thinks he's going to be the one to get it, and he pulls up his camera and he lines it up, and it's so crazy how like viscerally even the feeling thinking about watching this movie when he does it, and he puts his camera down and he kind of gets choked up. And he just says something along the lines of like, some things are just for me. Like some moments are just for me. He doesn't take the picture, which would have been in like National Geographic. It would have made any publication, right? Because this has never been filmed before. But to have the wherewithal in a moment to know I want this moment in my head forever the way it is. I saw that, and I remember I was living in San Diego at the time, and I went to I don't even remember why I was at some pier with my friend Braxton. We were standing on the edge of this pier, and we saw like an insane amount of dolphins. In my head, it's probably 30. I'm glad I didn't take a picture. It was probably like 5. But in my head, it's like 30. And they're swimming by. And my default move was to take out my phone and take a picture. And I just saw that movie, and I put it away. And I was just like, sat there. And we sat there for probably 20 minutes and watched them before they finally left. And it was such a beautiful moment where I felt so present. And ever since then, it's created such a value in my life of just being where your feet are. Like just taking a minute. Like if I'm with my family, I want to be with my family. I don't want to worry about making this look picture perfect. You said how like I don't post pictures if we're hanging out with friends because I don't want to. Like I'd rather just hang out with my friends. I don't want to have to worry about the anxiety of like, well, does everything look cool? Does my house look just so? Like if I'm going to, you know, and that's a part of like being a pastor too and being in front of people is people do formulate opinions about you and about. So I'm like, well, is my house just clean? Is it all? I don't want to like open up the world to that. I would rather just enjoy a moment with my friends and let that be enough. I don't need to show that to people. I don't need the validation of strangers. I want to hang out with my friends. I don't need to be viewing this beautiful pictures of this beautiful scenic thing of dolphins and feel like I got to capture it and to go show people how cool Michael's out in San Diego checking all this cool. I don't need that. Right. Let me just enjoy it. And it's been, as someone who grew up in that generation where I feel like I had to brand everything all the time, it's been like a relief that I just don't have to. Right. I just don't need to. It doesn't add value to me. It doesn't bring anything new. I don't need that dopamine rush. I would rather achieve that by laughing with my friends. That feels better. Absolutely, you know? And that's my fear of people. They're missing out on legitimately how rich life is. Yeah. Because they're so consumed with this like fake version of it. You know? Yeah, man. So you agree with me? Yeah. So that said, but no, I could be wrong. I don't think I am. Like but
that's a part of it and I found myself saddened by social media for that reason.
It's boring.
It is boring because it's and even some of them like this is gonna sound even weird. I get bummed out a little bit when someone is posting pictures in real time throughout the day because it's not even the photo dump. I actually like the photo dump. I like there was a trend, maybe it's still a trend where it's like for the month, photo dump or whatever.
Yeah, that's usually, if I post on Instagram, it's usually like, here's some moments that I really enjoyed this last month.
And
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you were the first one I saw, and then I want to say it was Maggie.
I think I got it from her, Maggie Burcham. She does
I'm
it.
about to call her by her maiden name. Sorry, Kenny. You guys have only been married forever.
I love when people do it because it's just like a cool, I've seen Maggie's sister do it. It's cool seeing people of like, just like a glimpse into their world.
Yeah.
Of seeing like a cool candid moment or like a cool sunset that they saw. I think that's great. Yeah. That's not a problem.
And you and your friends are good at posting. You're like, that was a moment.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not even saying it's not posed. It's like you're laughing, hey, like catch our picture, but it's like genuine versus like they're not.
Well, I view that as, I wouldn't recommend this for everybody because this is going to sound kind of, it helps if you know how to take a picture. So I do, right?
Right.
But I do that at a friend thing. Well, I'll try to snap a picture of someone candidly where I'm out to eat with somebody. I'll try to get a cool picture of them just because I want to remember them in that moment when they're not posing it. You know what I mean? Where I see them like laughing at a dumb joke or like experiencing a good meal. I want to remember like that face in that moment, not the whole, I don't want to see a duck face. I want to see your butt. You know what I mean? Like it's cool to capture people as they are because that to me feels like more of a time capsule. And so when you post a monthly thing, it's like, man, I appreciate these people and these moments and these like, we were getting ready for a podcast. It was just me and Michael Hall sitting at, it was a different table. We were sitting at a table doing a mic check for one. And he just looked really happy, and that just made me happy. So I snuck a picture of him, and I posted it on my Instagram. It's just like it's just cool to like show people these beautiful aspects of people. And it sounds biased because that's my practice, but like that's better than branding to me. Just sharing like beautiful things and beautiful moments, and even if your pictures are terrible, if it's an accurate representation of what's happening, isn't that better?
Yeah,
Some of
my favorite pictures of my family are horrible pictures.
Yeah, probably fuzzy.
Yeah, fuzzy and or like they're not flattering, and like the pictures that if you ask the person, they would go, "Please don't post that." You know what I mean? But
those are the best pictures.
They're the best pictures, and I'm like, I don't need to post it. Like. Like I'll do the same thing with Mary. I'll go like I'll capture her in a picture, and she'll like look at me. And she'll go, "Why did you do that?" And I'm like, "For me, not for you, not because I'm posting it." And I like that. And she was like, "Let me see the picture." And I'm like, "You don't need to because I'm not posting it."
Yeah,
and I don't want her to go like, "Well, here's the reasons why I don't like that." I'm like, no, it's for me. I promise I'm not posting it. Okay, one last thing about social media. Then I want to ask your opinion on how we fix this.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah. Your sister, I was talking with, I got to quit calling her sister, Mary Stalter. We were talking about some stuff in youth ministry, and she asked me my opinion about this new app that asks you to take spontaneous pictures. I don't know the name of it.
Be Real.
Be Real.
I'm assuming what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah. And she asked me my opinion about it, and she's like, it's like the antithesis of like the pose picture. You just got to do it. And she's like, what do you think about it? I go, I think it's the worst thing ever. And she goes, why? Oh, this is why. I think, how quickly do you think it will become staged in the sense of, so here's my opinion. The concept of the app, correct me, I've never used, I don't know much about it, is it alerts you how often?
Once a day.
Once a day.
Once a 24-hour period. Yeah.
And you have minutes to take a picture, 2 minutes to take a picture. And I thought all this app is doing is training now the generation to be ready 24 hours a day.
That's a really good point.
To have like a good picture ready. Like I'm telling you, because people will not post the things that bring embarrassment to them.
Nope.
And so you're basically going to have people that are going to like live with this in their mind of I want to give the picture that's real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the part of it too. Like you even see in social media, like a lot of the posts, there was a trend with the actual post, not necessarily pictures, but with the actual post where it's like, I'm going to be vulnerable now. I'm going to tell you about my failures, but I'm really going to tell you so you can know that I'm really a success.
And I'm going to say it in a redemptive way and how I fixed the situation and my life is great now.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so like what was once in the post, this like fake thing to brand has now gone to pictures, and it's like this blend. And that's why I didn't like that app was I was like, it feels like it's just going to hurt a generation.
Totally. And I think what else is kind of interesting about that app is you can still post afterwards. It'll just say posted 18 hours late, posted 6 hours late. So if they release it at 11 o'clock at night and you wake up in the morning.
And they shame you.
Put that date so you know. But I'm not kidding. I won't say exactly what they're doing because this person might listen to the podcast. But I follow someone on there, and it was posted like 18 hours late, and they were sweaty. Just got done working out. And I was just like, you waited until.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
You're proving my point.
Yeah, people will do what it takes to showcase. Where the Be Real, that app where I enjoy is to see, I just think it's so funny to see someone's frumpy like on the couch. Like, I think that's interesting because it's just like cool to see different people's settings and how they hang out and like, whatever, that's nice. Like I like seeing aspects of people's life, but people will always, exactly what you're saying, people will always find a way to make it look just so, to still make their lifestyle look attractive. And I think even more so because if this app's claim to fame is this is the real you, now you got to take your brand to the next level because if this is the real me,
You get what I'm saying?
Can you imagine how tired you'd be all the time?
Yeah, because you're going to be like, oh, I got to sprint through my house to get to that one room to get that pose I've been working on in 2 minutes to take that picture.
I was talking to you recently about this like tension that I sometimes feel, that there are so few people, and I don't know, I'd be interested to know how other people feel about this who aren't in ministry, but being in ministry, you feel like you have a limited amount of people you can be really vulnerable with, because you mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
Right.
Like you are their pastor, or you're their worship leader, or you're their whatever. So to me, I have friendships. Some of them I have 2 friends back in Akron who are like, I'm nothing but their idiot friend from high school to them. I can just be myself, never have to worry about it. Or I have you, and I have Kenny here at the church, where I feel like, a different pastors here on staff, where I feel like I can be really genuine. That list is pretty short, though.
Right.
I feel like what's happening with these kids is like, do you have any friends that you can be real with that are outside of this branding circle, that just see you when you're wearing like your frumpy clothes and you don't have to be on with? Or even if we're together, we're fine, but you're still all like leveraging each other for your brand, essentially, for what you publicize and what you put on because that's what's happening. It's no longer sharing pictures from your life. It's now content that you want to publicize as a part of like for your target demographic to get the most likes. It's just marketing. It's horrifying. But my thought, if I took away those couple really meaningful relationships where I can be vulnerable, I can be real, the thought of an entire generation of kids like being raised in a space where they don't have that, where everything just has to be just so and branded just right, seems so exhausting to me. Yeah. And I just can't imagine that's going to be good for their quality of life. Like it's going to lead to an identity crisis. It's going to lead to profound loneliness. And there are trends that we'd be irresponsible not to think about. Suicide rate is through the roof for young people, more than ever. More than ever. Anxiety.
And increasing. Right.
And increasing. Anxiety, depression, through the roof. Which I think there's a lot of theories. I think having a stagnant lifestyle and being in a developed nation where you sit in desks, and I think that's part of it. I think there's more to it than just social media, but I think we'd be foolish not to take that into account as well. And to
totally
say
agree.
These kids feel alone. They feel like they can't be themselves. They feel like they're constantly under a microscope and being judged by all their peers at all times. They have to have this brand and this like lifestyle brand, and you're like, you're a kid. And then they have the devastation of, again, you want that dopamine rush, and then you don't get it. Your picture only got 40 likes, maybe less, and you're just
people will delete
nobody
pictures
likes me.
if it doesn't
delete them?
Yeah.
Because they don't want the public shame aspect of like, I don't want people to see that my picture didn't get likes, so they just get rid of it. And then we want to be like, oh, what is happening with this generation? Where it's like, what do you mean what is happening with this generation?
Right, we created it.
We built this. The digital revolution built this, and we allowed it to happen, and we allowed kids to experiment with social media. We allowed kids to experiment with technology, and then this is the product of it. And at some point, and then, all right, so this might seem kind of controversial. I'm not like trying to dog on anybody and just highlight our church as being cool and no one else's church doing it right. Churches then leverage this for marketing purposes. Churches want to seem cool. So they leverage this concept, and they want to brand their church just so, and they want to brand their music just so. They want to brand their. So I always think it's interesting to look at a church's social media feed and the things that they're posting. This is where it gets a little gross, because I'm going to talk about our church because I do think we do this pretty well.
Right.
Our goal when we post things on social media is to highlight things that people can have access to if they walk into our doors. I want to see on our social media kids getting discipled. Right. In a safe environment, in a safe environment that was tailored to them. I want to see people worshiping, people engaging with their connect groups, people listening to a message, people, because that to me, if I'm unsaved and my life is bad and I see my friend share something like that, I'd be like, man, that looks like something that could make my life better. That's our purpose. When I see a church posting lifestyle brand content about the clothes that they're wearing, about what I mean, things like that, or just trying to make it look as cool as possible, not as engaging as possible, not as relational as possible, not as spiritual as possible, but it's cool and leveraging it's always confusing to me.
That's where I began. So that's the church version of where I began today. We're trying to invite people into our life, into our church life, where these are real things that happen. Yeah. When churches go for the cool factor, they're trying to invite people into a brand. And that's the same. I 100% agree with you. That feels weird to me because I'm like, what's the brand? Like the church brand should be Jesus, right? Yeah. It should be life change. And I mean, I'll just say it bluntly, the brand of a church should not be coolness. You can be contemporary and you can be casual, but that shouldn't even be your brand. Yeah. Like I don't want anyone to walk away. I mean this so genuine. I don't want anyone to walk away from the Tree.Church and talk about a performance, to talk about a cool factor, to talk about any of that. I want people to walk away talking about the presence of God. I mean, we talk about that every week. We work for to create like an environment where we can strip away distractions so that people can put their focus on God.
Yeah.
And I realize we have, so some people could look at us and go, well, you guys have lights and stuff like that.
Sure.
But that's just to make the experience like the celebratory of what we're trying to proclaim in our lives.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree. I think even in the church world, I was talking to Mary Stelter about this. One of the things that's so weird is there's even fashion now in the church world that's not in any other world.
Yeah,
so
it's
like
unique to churches. It's so
yeah, so
weird.
like celebrity pastors of gigantic churches, which I'm not against in any way, but they just have a natural or national or international platform, but they dress a certain way, and pastors in podunk little towns are dressing just like them, even though nobody else in culture is dressing like that.
Yeah.
They're dressing that way because they're trying to create a brand. And I think it's the same dangerous thing that we're seeing is
big time.
Pastors are becoming a brand and churches are becoming a brand. And it's the same devastation, I think. So like an individual is trained to be fake. I think churches can be trained to be that way, and it's dangerous.
And what are you telling people who haven't come to your church? If I'm only showing, so this is another policy we have with our social media, is that we show a wide demographic. Mm-hmm. So as a church, we have a target demographic because we know that's what continues your church for generations, that being young families.
Young families, yeah.
So when we tailor cultural things, the sound of the music, we want to tailor it to young families and we'll always do that. So as young families become 50-year-olds, we'll readdress and we'll go, you know what I mean? We'll always go for young families because we want sustainability. But even when we highlight things, we want people of all ages, of all demographics, dressing in all types of styles because I want you to feel welcomed here.
Yeah.
Do you remember the conversation we had about when we started allowing hats on stage?
Right.
It's actually really funny the way it came about. I think we were interviewing somebody for a job that mentioned it. We were just like, oh, that's actually a good point. We didn't end up hiring that person. But we talked about having hats on stage, and the whole point was like we're in an agriculture community where a lot of people wear hats. Like, I don't want someone to come to our church and feel uncomfortable and feel like, oh, I don't fit in here. So when you're showing only the cool, young, hip people of your church on your social media, if I'm 60 years old and I feel like I'm in a different season of life, it's like, oh, that church is not for me.
Right.
And that breaks my heart because it's like, but it is. Like,
Right,
church is for you. It's just as much for you.
So like right now in our
represented.
church, this is not an exaggeration, our two largest demographics that are increasing in our church are young families and people over 70.
Which is cool.
Yeah, think about that dynamic.
Yeah.
I had a lunch today with one of our elders. He's 75, Mike Milby. And he was just talking about how much he loves it. And he said his friends say to him that don't go to our church, they say, but don't they have that really loud music? And he goes, yeah, but do you know what we also have? A lot of young families. And so he looks around and sees the young families and the children and thinks like, this is what it should be. And he goes, Mike goes like, yeah, not all the songs are my preference. And I go, you know what, Mike? They're not my preference either. I'm 43 years old. You can attest to this.
Yeah.
Not every song first of all, I don't approve. I mean, I can veto stuff. I recognize I have a little bit.
So we talk about it today. Very rarely have you been like, hey, I don't like. It's happened probably twice since the 7 years I've worked here. We've been like, don't do that song. I don't like it.
And one song was just I was tired of songs with the word water in it.
Yeah.
Like,
That's super rare though. That's not normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in the story I'll tell quickly, and I maybe have to share this before, was one time you guys, this is within the last year, you were like, I want to get your opinion on a song. It was like your whole team was there in the front room in you guys' office. I was all right, play it. So you play it and it gets done. You go, what do you think? I go, hold on. Let me just ask you guys. And I was like, Lauren, what do you think? She's like, love it. Michael, what do you think? Oh, I love it. I went around the room. Everyone's like, yeah, it's good. I go, all right, let's do it. And you go, like, oh, I'm so happy you like it. And I go, oh, I don't like it. I hate it.
this.
I hate this song. And but I go, you know what? It's like it is that thing of I want the next generation to be reached.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not perfect. I don't know how we got on that discussion, but
No, well, I think what's interesting is, but if you only highlight that, and if you only represent that, who do we lose?
yeah, that was it. Yeah,
we lose Mike Milby. We lose his wisdom.
Yeah.
We lose his leadership over our church if we're just pandering to like the cool people.
Right.
You completely neglect this.
It sounds like you just called him the uncool people.
Sorry, Mike, you're
only
awesome.
pandering to
you're
cool
the coolest.
people.
You're the coolest. But if we're just like essentially pandering, creating content to try to make ourselves look cool, we're neglecting people with wisdom, people who have much to give. We're just saying you don't have a place here, and it's like, I'm sorry, you're not going to convince me that makes your church better.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you 3 different groups. I'm going to get your opinion.
Okay.
First of all, just in general for the individual, how do we fix this? For parents that are asking, like, you know, what do I need to do? Because like something today just sparked, they're like, I never even thought about that way. The whole dopamine and training them and stuff like that. Ask about that. And then lastly, just as churches, what can churches do to be more authentic? So let's look at the first group. If someone is like, okay, whether I'm doing this, my kid's doing this, but let's talk about the person who's doing it. Mm-hmm. I realize my social media has become my brand. Yeah. I'm trying to brand myself. I'm addicted to that rush, and like I view everything through that. What are some practical advice? Are there some practical things that you could just say to them, like, here, start here, do these 2 or 3 things, and I promise you it will help?
Yeah, 2 things immediately come to mind. The first one is give yourself permission to put your phone down. Like the whole world does not need to see what's happening behind closed doors, and not in a way that you're hiding something. It's not in a way that you don't need the validation of everybody. Enjoy a moment. Like some of my favorite moments, and I really mean this, some of my favorite moments in my life are sitting around a bonfire with my friend Mike Kurtz when we were in college, singing worship songs together. If I, sadly, in my immaturity at that moment, had a smartphone, I would have tried to capture the perfect video. Right. I would have tried to capture the coolest picture so I could post it and be like, how cool are me and Mike? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, with age and wisdom, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
If you can skip that process of just losing sight of the specialness of moments and just putting your phone down and engaging with your friends, engaging with your family, being where your feet are. If this is where I'm at, I want to be right here. I don't want to think about the dopamine later.
Sure.
I don't want to think about the post later. I want to think about right now.
Because picking that phone up in that moment is disconnecting you from that moment, but it's also ruining. How do you say that word? Ruining that moment for everybody else too. You know what I mean?
That's what I shared about last night about Gina sneaking a video of me. It's like, now I feel weird. Like, delete it. Like, you're taking people out of it. Organic. Now I gotta fix my posture. And
come here, Darby.
Flex a little bit. You know, where it's like, oh my gosh. All right, you commented on somebody's social media recently. It was a pastor friend of yours. Aaron, I laughed so hard. You're just like, oh, I thought you were just flexing when you were in that.
Yeah, I said, post. Why so serious? And then he said, like, they snapped it too fast. And I was like, oh, I thought you just couldn't smile and flex.
Because he looks pretty buff.
He does look buff. Yeah, I mean, he's fit. That was my way of saying you look fit.
Sure, no, I just laughed so hard at that. But that's the reality. Is the moment you pick up that phone, you're now out of the moment. And you can say, oh, yeah, you can. Maybe play it safe. Right. Put your phone down. The other thing that immediately came to mind is like, you don't need to give the masses access to everything that you do. So for me, my Instagram profile is private. Like if you want to follow me, you have to request it, and I'll approve it or not. And it's like, as a pastor and as like somewhat of what we would consider now as like a young pastor, you're like you are, influencer is such a horrifying word, but you are influential to people. Right. And a lot of times people want to maximize their spread. Well, I want to be influential to everybody. I want to open up that. I'm just not that interested in that. I like the church being that. Yeah. I want the church to have the widest spread to as many people as possible. I don't need my personal life to be accessible to everybody in the whole world. I don't need. So if you just make your Instagram profile private, police who sees it, ask yourself, do I want this person seeing this content? If it's a random stranger who I feel like is just, specifically if you're a young person or a young woman, do I want this 40-year-old guy engaging my content and seeing pictures that I post? Make your Instagram profile private and feel free to just not post stuff all the time. Yeah. Let things be private. Let things be between you and your family. Be so present in that moment. I promise your life will be better. Yeah. I guarantee it.
One more thing that I know that you've done, I've done, but you did it recently, is a social media fast of just getting off it for a season. So like it helps like reset. Yeah. You said people are doing this with like a dopamine fast, taking a dopamine fast, but like you went off of Facebook for like 6 months.
It was 6 months. It was great.
Yeah, and I know Pastor Phil has done. Actually, I think Pastor Phil does it like scheduled throughout the year. Like he says, like, all right, guys, I'm going to be off for a couple months, and then he comes back on. He says that reset is good for him. And I know I do that periodically in the summer. Speak to that just a little bit.
Yeah, just take a break. So for me, right now, I was off of Facebook for 6 months, and it was really peaceful. Like I didn't hear about everyone's crazy opinions about everything. I didn't feel like I had any obligation to engage with a bunch of people that aren't in proximity to me. Yeah. That's a weird thing about being on social media is you feel an obligation of like, oh, I should make a post sometimes, or I should like, or if people are commenting or messaging, I got to engage in this whole thing. Just to not have it. Like, nope, let me just focus on what's in proximity. Let me focus on right here, right now. Here's what's interesting. After that 6 months, I re-downloaded Facebook, and I appreciated it more. I did appreciate people posting stuff. And eventually, I won't again, and I'll probably take another break. Yeah. But if you find yourself that social media is giving you, I was talking to a family member about this recently, where they were just, it made them feel bad. It gave them the FOMO. Seeing the highlight reel of other people's lives made them feel sad about their own.
For those that are not hip, FOMO,
fear of missing out. Right? Yeah, so it gives you that fear. Where I was talking to this family member, they're like, every time this person shares this, it's like their life looks so cool and mine is so boring. And I just want to look at them and be like, I promise their life's not that cool. Right. They are posting the very best part of it, not when it's like 1 a.m. and they're eating Cheetos and just like being dull and boring. Like that's not what they're posting. If you find yourself being anxious or feeling that fear of missing out, or you feel like everyone's life is cool and mine is boring, or I'm so sick of everyone's crazy opinion, or I feel like I have to be on all the time for Be Real or for social media, you just give yourself permission to get off of it for a while. And then if you re-engage it and you still feel that way, delete it. Get rid of it. Right. Who cares? You have no obligation to social media. It's a new idea.
It's good. All right, so I'm going to speak to the parents, and then you speak to the church at the end.
Sure.
For me, if you're a parent and you're like, all right, what do? I would say you have to take control of your kids' social media. And I think what I mean by that is I think so often parents, I think the mismessage that our culture has been giving parents is that autonomy is a way to show a kid you love them. I think there couldn't be anything, one, more unbiblical, because the biblical concept of parenting is training up your child, being actively involved with a purpose, destination that you're working toward. But also our culture says like autonomy is good, but I'm like, their brains are still developing until they're 25 years old. Why in the world would you give autonomy to someone who doesn't have the capacity yet to make the proper decisions that won't destroy their lives, right? Yeah. So take control of the social media in that, be involved. So like, here's what I would say. So I'm not a perfect parent. I don't ever want to give that image, and I don't think that way. I don't act that way. But these are some things that I've done that work. I have 4 kids. Only one has social media. My oldest, who's a senior. But even with that, all my kids have iPhone, or the 3 oldest have iPhones. My daughter doesn't have a phone, and it's too young to. But on theirs, you can control the amount of time they can spend on their phone and on specific apps.
That's awesome.
So like I have different degrees. So social media would be one of them for my oldest. But you can have games, you can have music, you can put them all into their own categories. You can set the amount of time, downtime. So like all my kids' phones at a certain time of the evening, they just quit working. So like they can still receive stuff, they just can't see it yet in phone calls. I can still text them at any point. I can still call them at any point. Awesome. They can call me or Mary at any point. And there's some other numbers I put in there like emergency contacts, but it shuts their phone off. But even the amount of time, so like my oldest who has social media, the reason it hasn't really been a problem for him is because he has an hour a day and he knows that. He's never really, only one time has he ever asked for extra Instagram time. So I know he's not abusing it. Second part about it is I have his log on. So like it's connected to my Instagram page. So like through my app, in the sense that I can switch to his account immediately, and he knows that. That was like
his DMs. You can see.
Yeah, I can read all his direct messages. I can look at who he's following and who's following him, and I'll go in there periodically. He might not even know this. I'll go in there periodically and just start deleting accounts. Like I'm like, because some accounts, the humor of it is not what I like.
Crass,
yeah, it's just a little too crass. I delete it. Mary asked me this week, she's like, what are you thinking about for our other kids? And I said, at this point, I don't think I'm going to let any of them have any social media. I realize in that tension, that creates tension even with my kids. It really does. And I recognize I'm not called to be their BFF. I'm not called for them to like me. I'm called to train them as their parent. I would not give my children something that I know would hurt them. I'm not going to give them drugs that will hurt them. I'm not going to allow them to play with fire because it can hurt them. I'm not going to give social media to them knowing it can hurt them. So when Facebook comes out and says, Facebook and Instagram, it is known to create body image issues and to damage people's mental health, specifically teenage girls and young adults. And like, I'm not going to give access to it. When every person I've ever talked to that talks about Snapchat and teenagers, every teenager I've talked to just goes like, oh my goodness, there's so much drama on Snapchat and it's like awful and stuff. I'm like, why would I give that? And I think we're a generation now where parents think like, well, I have to because everyone else is doing it. And I'm like, you don't. But if you are, make sure that you have the passwords, make sure you have limits on it so that you can protect your kids from it.
Can I actually ask you like a follow-up question with that? So you have, and I'm sure you didn't nail it perfectly with Cole and you have to adjust for your other kids. But that said, you are on probably the more like cutting edge side of that, of knowing this is probably unhealthy. Let me be really patient with my kids. What would you say to parents who, like, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, man, I have a sophomore in high school. They're in deep. They've got everything. They've got Snapchat. They've got Instagram. It's hard to then take it back and be like, okay, do you have any advice for those kind of parents where it's like, hey, that's great that you caught that before and with your kids coming up and with Cole, I'm already in this. Do you have any advice for them specifically of how to, like, I guess not pull off the Band-Aid, but now fix a very real problem that their kids probably have with social media?
Yeah, I mean, one part of it, I would say you do have to have a perspective of kind of what I just said in that, be honest and recognize, is this damaging your kid? And if anything else was damaging your kid consistently, would you be casual about it?
Wow.
Would you, like, if you found out your kid is eating this food consistently that's damaging their insides, you didn't know about it before, but man, they really like it, they're really all in. Would you go like, hey, they've been doing it for 5 years and they love it, I don't want to pull it? No, right? You'd go like, you would say, I'm sorry, you can't have this anymore. And I feel like that same thing. But I would say in the process of removing it, I would have really purposed conversations with your kids where you say, let's talk this through. But I can't sugarcoat this. Your kids will be mad. My kids, when I've limited them, there has been anger, there has been emotion. Like, I am like heartbroken over this. I mean, where they're heartbroken and I'm heartbroken that they're heartbroken, where they're frustrated because like they're like everybody else has this but me. And I'm like, I get it, guys. I'm like, it just is what it is at this point. So I think you as a parent have to just kind of steel yourself where you're like, I am called to be the parent.
Yeah.
Which means at times I'm called to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And Mary and I are comfortable with that. And I'm not sugarcoating this to say that like it makes it easy for us. I don't like when my kids cry about stuff and they're mad and frustrated. It's not like I'm like, oh well, I'm the good guy. I'm like, guys, I'm heartbroken. I'm sad that this is the reality. But I think parents just have to understand their role in that.
Yeah. So for me as a young parent, so my oldest is about to turn 4. That's like haunting me right now, knowing that's going to happen. Like I know that I just know, and it makes me feel so guilty. I'm going to be more restrictive as a dad. I know that it's going to be like, there are going to be elements of my kids are probably going to throw fits and say, I hate you and I'm upset. And like, I really, everyone else in that FOMO. And we've talked about too, even with clothing with kids, we're like, I want to give my kids cool clothes. So nobody wants their kid to stand out in a bad way or not feel like they're part of the other and not included into into their friend group. But even the way you said that was so convicting to me and just gave me so much encouragement of like, if you found out something was toxic to your kids, you stop it. If you found out something was poisonous, you just like, would they like it? Yeah. Can I love them enough to say, you might hate me, you might hate this. Yeah. This might make you feel bad, but like, I love you enough just to say no. And
that really is my conviction is I keep imagining the 20-year-old version of them. Wow. And I go, the 20-year-old version of them is going to be healthier and happier because the high school version of them was mad at me, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that.
And I don't want that. I don't want people to miss that. Like you have to envision what the goal is. And Mary and I have very purpose goals for our kids. We want them to know Jesus and love Jesus and be in a relationship with Jesus, but we also want them to be as healthy as possible. And I just don't think social media adds value.
That's super
and so you have to, and if you're going to allow it, you have to limit it, so that it's just not a constant thing. All right, last thing then I'll ask you real quick. You've already talked about it, so maybe just kind of reiterate a couple of quick things.
Sure.
Churches, churches, the whole concept is, I think there has been some pressure to be cool, as cool as a priority over real. Just speak to that again. What would you, if a church was coming in and they're like, all right, we're evaluating social media, we're trying to improve it, or
super good.
Whatever.
Yeah. Don't be cool, be accurate would be the first thing I could say. For a very small percentage of people, what is accurate is cool. Yeah. If I'm a growing church in Brooklyn and my target demographic is young people in Brooklyn, your social media is going to look cool. Mm-hmm. If you hire a social media coordinator at your church and they want to copy a young church in Brooklyn because it's cool, and you're in Lancaster, Ohio, or you're in some agriculture community, you don't look accurate, you look silly, and you look like disingenuous. And here's the other part of that. People will eventually come to your church and be let down.
Sure.
And then you have egg on your face. Like, this is not an accurate representation of what's actually happening in here.
Yeah.
Or even that's a bigger question. If it is that problematic that you so don't represent your community that you represent this like very hip New York church?
And even you might be pushing them away.
Yep, totally.
Right? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, because if your demographic doesn't look like that, I'm not going to go to your church. I want to go to a church where people want their vanity. People want to feel safe. They want their vanity to be won over. Like, people look like me there. They talk like me there. That makes me feel safe. Way more willing to go to your church. So what I would advocate for is let your social media, this is something we're really passionate about our church, be an accurate and excellent representation of your church. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to post blurry pictures because I want to accurately represent and excellently represent what's happening here. So excellence really matters to me. That's why we have lights. It's like, no, if we're going to do music, it's going to be excellent. It's going to be culturally relevant. It's going to be great. But that's not the point. We're not going to, the point of it is worship. The point of your social media is not all the peripheral things. The point of it is to accurately show people. And here's the encouragement I would give you as to why this actually is really, really important. Mm-hmm. If there's a young family in your community and maybe they grew up in church, they don't go now, they're married, they have a kid. And that kid, they've realized maybe we should get into a church. Like, I want this kid to be raised. I was raised in a Christian church, and their spouse, this is such a weird hypothetical, but stick with me. And their spouse is like, sure, I'll give it a try. Like, if we want our kids to be raised in a church, sounds good. And then you can think of, well, I had a friend share their church. It looked really cool. Like, their kids seemed happy. It seemed like a cool environment. Let's go check that out. What I tell our team oftentimes is that a single picture on a Sunday morning will not change someone's life. A social media post likely, maybe very rarely, likely will never change someone's life. What it could lead is a curiosity, and that person comes and checks out your church. They give their life to the Lord. Their kids' lives are different forever. Their grandkids' lives are different forever. Take it seriously, accurately and excellently represent what's happening, because it is worthy of your time and energy. That family that I'm talking about, that is on Facebook, that is on Instagram, they're worthy of you showcasing, this is what God's doing here.
Right.
Just don't. But the second you try to brand this lifestyle thing and make it inaccurate, you're doing a disservice to them. They might be turned off and not show up at all, or not worse, but or they could come and it could be so different than what they saw. And you talk about that a lot, is don't bait and switch people. Don't have the world's craziest Christmas experience. Then people come the next week, be like, wah, wah. Like, this is really boring. Let it be accurate. Let it be excellent. Let it be inclusive. And I really love where our social media is at for that purpose. It feels like I'm in the lobby of our church when I look at it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. 100%. When I look at pictures, I never think like that's not accurate, or that feels like it doesn't feel like branding. It feels like inviting people into our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Which is going back to what your point. Yeah. Invite people into your lives. Inviting people into a brand. And here's the other part too. We're raising a generation of kids that are catching on to it.
Yeah,
they know when you're lying. They it's like I was just talking about this week with somebody. When the internet first happened, people would fall for the Nigerian prince email scheme because they weren't savvy to it yet. Yeah. Or we just saw the cat, or I don't know if you saw it, but the catfishing thing with Manti Te'o, where it's like that was so early in social media.
Right.
He's busy with football, probably didn't even know about that. Now people are more wise to that.
Yeah.
This upcoming generation is so slick on the internet. They know when something's fake. And if they're reading and looking at your church and it feels fake, they're not going to come. They want something. They want a genuine encounter. You know?
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Well, thanks as always for joining me. And if anyone has any questions or follow-up that they want us to talk about in future podcasts, feel free to shoot us an email. You can always email ICouldBeWrong@Tree.Church. And we'll read those emails and we'll process through them. And if it's not something we'll talk about in a podcast, we might still email you back and answer your questions that way. So if this is encouraging to you, if it stirred your mind thinking, share it with friends and family. Let them know. And always, we love you guys, and we'll see you on the next podcast.